Welcome to the All Hoops podcast. I'm your host, Steve Inman. I'm joined by my star producer and co-host, Chris Brito. The San Antonio Spurs, as Chris and I thought, have a new face of the franchise. We'll delve into the fits at the top of next month's draft. Plus, the Miami Heat and the Denver Nuggets are both one win away from the NBA Finals. Before we get to all that, Chris, my friend, I hope you had a great weekend. How are you?
Hey, buddy, I had a great weekend. I saw the New York Liberty destroy the Indiana Fever at Barclays. And, the NBA still never fails to disappoint. But you have two series right now that are 3-0 each. The Heat and the Nuggets are both winning their respective series. My first reaction with the Heat, at least, right? It just shows me you can interpret it either two ways. The Heat are the fakest eighth seed of all time, and they are probably much better than they were ranked in before the end of the regular season. And then two, it shows me that the Knicks maybe are closer to their goal than we had previously thought. Because right now the Celtics aren't really providing much of a fight. And I think, and this is obviously a testament to that organization, that they're like all mentally tough players. They're clearly seasoned, and they're clearly a group that it has a lot of momentum right now. And they're all on the backs of Jimmy Butler, who's been amazing this postseason. To me, this has been a big surprise in the sense, and this is not as much of a big surprise as the other series. My bad. The Celtics were always like mentally tough, mentally weak, or at least it appeared to be the case. And I don't know if that's a coach thing. I don't know if it's like a best players thing. And I think we're getting to the point in the season right now where, what do you do if you're the Celtics, right? Like, assuming this series ends in a few games, or if it ends the next game, does Joe Mazzulla get fired? Should the Celtics retool? I think the easiest answer out of both those situations is that they should fire Joe Mazzulla. Like, I think it was a bad fit to start. I think a lot of expectations were sort of put on Joe, and he was the third or fourth assistant on that bench last year. And it's obviously a learning moment for him, and he really wasn't put in a position to succeed. And I think it'd be best for the organization and him to like part ways in the offseason. That's number one. In terms of the nucleus, which is, Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown had an awful game, and so did Tatum for game 3 against the Heat. Don't touch them. Just let them grow. They're still very young. Getting wings like that are they don't come there often, and I don't think the Celtics should change anything with their roster necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, those are two very different issues, the coach versus the roster. I agree. I think there are just too many great coaching candidates out there right now that could be a really good fit and boost to the Celtics to not explore that possibility if this ends in a sweep. I think Celtic fans have not really liked Mazzulla. They question why he doesn't call timeouts. People feel as if like he got this job because of a very weird circumstance with Ime Udoka, and they did not really have time right on the eve of the season to do a full coaching search. Whereas they made him the interim. They played well in the regular season, rightfully so. They removed the interim tag. It's tough because I feel like he deserves to be there. It seems tough to say he deserves to be the head coach. And it's going to be really hard to say we're bringing in Nick Nurse or Budenholzer or somebody else, but Mazzulla is going to be on the staff, and hope that, one, the new coach is okay with that, and two, we hope that Mazzulla is cool with that. So I think, unfortunately, it's going to end in a firing, not a reassignment, and we'll see where he ends up next. But in terms of this roster, you're right. Brown, Tatum, you got to keep them together. It's so hard to find great wings. I think you just got to find a real point guard who can get those guys the ball in their spots. I don't know who that guy is right now. I think we need, maybe next show we'll think of that name when the Celtics are eliminated. It's, to me, Chris Paul of 2 years ago, but you can't really turn back time. And you really just need a guy who can be a leader and a guy who can kind of distribute and get guys good looks offensively. Because too often it looks like ISO Tatum, ISO Jaylen Brown. We question Jaylen Brown's ability to dribble. Tatum looks like the best player in the NBA half the time, and the other half, it's how is he 2 of 15? We talk about the Marcus Smart thing where he's taking more shots than the two of them in crunch time combined. They really just need a floor general who can kind of get everyone their looks, who can kind of take pressure off the big two. And I think that plus a new coach means the NBA champions could be the Boston Celtics a year from now.
I don't even think it needs to be like this like former star or like a current star. It just needs to be a vet, like a Mike Conley type. Somebody there who can
I like him too. I just think he's also over the hill. Like you need a Chris Paul, a Conley of 2 years ago. Somebody who's not in their prime, maybe, but somebody who could still contribute at a high level.
Yeah, I agree. And the Celtics need to do some soul searching, but let's not kid ourselves. Like the Celtics still have one of the most talented teams in the NBA.
Yeah.
They've made the Eastern Conference Finals like multiple times throughout the last few years. And they're probably just one or two pieces away. And I think they were probably on the right track if they had the right leadership. So I don't think the Celtics should change. As much as I'd like Jaylen Brown in a Knicks uniform, I think if you're if you're the Celtics franchise, you want to have those two untouched. You made the finals last year. They're still in their prime. Like, don't touch it. But shifting gears a bit, the Denver Nuggets and the Lakers, the Nuggets are up 3-0. This series to me has been the more surprising one because I didn't expect the Lakers to be down 3-0. I think the Lakers had their chances in game 2. And I just thought they would at least have won game 3. But obviously that's not how it goes. I think LeBron is showing his age a little bit, and it's not a father time is undefeated. And even for LeBron James, who's been in the NBA for as long as he has, like there's nothing else he needs to prove,
I don't think the Lakers have really done anything wrong. I just think this Denver offense is just so incredible. Like the Lakers have been in all of these games. They haven't been blown out in any of these games. I don't think LeBron has played poorly, but you had Joker have an historic game 1. You had Murray have a 30-point first half and basically almost a 30-point second half in game 2. These guys are playing out of their minds. So like defensively, the Lakers have just not been there. They have not been able to stop Denver in transition. And this is not like me saying, oh, well, the Knicks need to solve the zone, right? Like, I don't think this can be stopped. I just think this Denver team is a freight train going all the way to the championship. I don't think they can be stopped offensively. They weren't stopped by Phoenix. They weren't stopped by Minnesota. They're not being stopped by the Lakers. And I don't think they'll be stopped by the Heat next round either.
I don't know about that, buddy. I mean, you put money on the Nuggets to win it all, but I put money on the Heat to win it all.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I did. Before this round, I did.
Got it. So right now it looks like Denver, Miami is a collision course for the finals, both up 3-0. A team has never blown a 3-0 lead. Do we think the NBA, marketing, Silver, whoever you want to talk about there, do you think they're upset that they're not going to get this storied Lakers Celtics potential finals run?
To be honest with you, I think it's a little overstated, that aspect. Obviously Celtics Lakers would be a ratings gold mine. That being said, I don't think the Nuggets versus the Heat are unmarketable either. I think Jimmy Butler, he's probably one of the more fascinating characters in the NBA. I mean, look at his own personal story. I think is something worth the national attention. And Jokic, like some people in this podcast claims that centers are dead.
And I said except for him.
Clearly not. Clearly not.
He's a ball handler. He runs their offense.
Right. Anyway,
centers don't do that other than him. And I've been saying that. Don't put words in my mouth saying, "Oh, I didn't think Joker would ever win." I picked them to win the whole thing.
All right. Anyway, Jokic. Jokic is such an amazing freaking player, and it'd be nice to see him win. I think he's got a band of teammates who are like also similar to the Heat, are sort of like not really the household names yet. Um, Jamal Murray made his name a little bit at the bubble, but Michael Porter had back issues, and he's playing a role in this team. Aaron Gordon, probably before this run, maybe he was most well known as being one of the guy who never who lost the slam dunk contest twice, you know, but should have won it. So all these guys are getting an opportunity to be on the national stage, and good for them.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I like their bench. I like their depth. I've never really been a big Caldwell Pope guy. I think he's been outstanding this season. I think he's been really a missing piece for them, and I think he's going to get a big new contract when his is up for sure. He's been awesome.
Mhm.
And look, I think these finals are going to be great. I think Miami's experience in the finals will be really important in those early games where not that I think Denver's going to say, "Oh my God, the lights are too bright with everybody watching us now," but I know Miami won't feel that way, and
Yeah.
so they're going to be ready to go. Yes, they didn't do it with the fans in the bubble, but they still, Jimmy Butler and most of this core of this team were here for the bubble, and so we're including the best coach in the NBA and Eric Spoelstra. So I believe that this team is going to put up a fight. I'm going to take Denver. We'll talk about it again in the next few days, but obviously, I'm really looking forward to the finals, especially when two series are up 3-0.
Yeah, and Mike Malone isn't, you know, a bad coach either himself. I think if you're a basketball fan, like you enjoy the sport, it's going to be a very entertaining finals. Um, it's not so much of the star power as much as it is about like how like these teams have a high basketball IQ, and I feel like that's going to be a lot of fun for us. Like we appreciate basketball, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, and the X-rated X factor in this is going to be, can Tyler Hero come back? Because when we heard that 6 to 8 week prognosis in the first round, we said, well, they're going to be way gone by then. But you get him back for part of this series. You have Bam with finals experience, Jimmy with finals experience, even Duncan Robinson, who's made a return to relevance in this last couple of weeks. He has finals experience now with this Miami Heat team. So I think they'll put up a fight, and I'm really excited to see how that plays out. But Chris, let's get to our final thoughts right after this. All right, Chris, final thoughts time here. The Spurs got the #1 pick. We all know where they're going with that. They're going to take Victor Wembanyama. They have their next big after, Robinson, Duncan, now Wemby. How do you see the fit?
Oh, I love it. That I mean, we were joking before the podcast that we should have put money on the Spurs getting that #1 pick because the NBA scriptwriters had it perfectly. Like
I mean,
a
it seemed
guy,
obvious, right?
it seems so obvious. I mean, the Spurs have been forged by international like players like Manu Ginobili, Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Tiago Splitter. I mean, Boris Diaw. Like we can name a bunch of them, and three of those guys are actually gonna go out of their way to help mentor Wemby. And I always feel like you know the beauty of him coming to a market like San Antonio is that it's kind of small, so he doesn't need necessarily have to like be under the spotlight as much as he would for a bigger city. And I think with those three people with him, I think it'll really help his maturation as an NBA player early on. And I think you really couldn't ask for a better coach or someone who understands um, where Wemby's like sort of coming from as an international player, prospect, and really molding him into what he needs to be. And I think the Spurs is the perfect fit.
Yeah, and we always kind of wondered, like, what is Pop doing in San Antonio still? Like, why is he coaching this 23-win team? Well, here we are. He has the next face of the franchise. They're going to be just fine. They have some pretty interesting young players to go around him. This is not like it's a blank canvas for Wemby. Like, Keldon Johnson can play. He was on the Team USA team last summer. You have Devin Vassell, who's turned into one of the best catch and shooters in the NBA. You have Jeremy Sohan, who looked like basically what Brooklyn probably thought they were getting out of Ben Simmons. Guy who could handle the ball, doesn't really shoot well, but does so many other things really well. That's a pretty interesting young core. It doesn't mean they're going to win a championship in the next couple of years, but you all of a sudden combine those four guys with cap space. They have about 40 million in cap space. They got to use on somebody. Maybe you go out and get yourself a veteran point guard, maybe a Fred VanVleet. Maybe you go trade for Chris Paul's contract. And all of a sudden now you have a pretty interesting young starting five that you can kind of go out there and say, we're going to go compete for the play. And we're not really looking to be in the lottery again this year. We're going to go get Victor as much contention reps as we can. They'll probably put them on TV several times next year. It's going to be a really fun situation.
Oh yeah, this is perfect for Victor and good for France too. Like I think this is the first time maybe in the history of the NBA that there are most of the best NBA players are international prospects or international players.
Absolutely, for sure. In terms of number 2 and 3, these are interesting things because Charlotte gets the second pick. It seems like they're always in the second pick every time there's this generational guy. You remember Anthony Davis, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, they take number 2. I think they should just go with Scoot Henderson. It seems like he's the second best guy. There's Brandon Miller still there. So people are mixed about where they should go. It seems to me like Scoot is more of a scoring guard. And I think you have LaMelo, you can pair him with Scoot. That's the way I would play it. It seems like everyone thinks they're going to go Brandon Miller. What do you think?
I would, for Portland's sake, I'd love for them to take Scoot so that way Brandon Miller could go to Portland.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think finding guards in the NBA is like a really talented guard is hard to find, and I think that's probably the right move. Brandon Miller, I think he comes with a little bit more baggage, and I feel like Charlotte's really not in a place to like take a risk on a player who might be have some sort of history or may not have history. Like that whole cloud going over him, which we don't have to get into on this episode. Um, I think for the Hornets' future, I don't think you want to be associated with that. You already have
I love
you already
Scoot.
have, I like Scoot too. I'm just saying like you already have the Bridges situation. You
Yeah.
don't need to get another player like that.
Yeah. I mean, they obviously got to do their due diligence on both players for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I I'd be curious to see, well, let's say Charlotte takes Brandon Miller too. What does Portland do with the third pick? You already have two undersized guards in Dame and Simons. There's not room for a third guy in Scoot Henderson. At the same time, they don't seem to want to trade Dame. I don't think that you want to pair him with Scoot. I wonder if a trade where somebody can move up and get Scoot Henderson could help turn the Blazers' fortune around, or perhaps another team's fortune around. So we have to wait and see about that.
I think if the Hornets don't pick up Scoot, that makes that third pick so fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
Any big losers you saw in the lottery? Anybody who really got hosed here?
uh, the Knicks.
Well, we didn't think the Knicks were going to get that pick from Dallas, but just confirms it for sure. I thought Detroit really got destroyed here. They had, the one of the worst records in the NBA. They go from the top odds to fifth. They had they lost Cade basically for the season. There was talk that Cade was ready to go and they were trying to hold him out for better odds. Instead, they go to fifth, and they basically had a lost season. So it's pretty disappointing to see how that one turned out. There's always one loser in these drafts that is always forgotten about when you think of revisiting these drafts 2-3 years after. But this year it's Detroit.
Yeah. So on Monday, Carmelo Anthony announced his retirement from the NBA, and he didn't play last season. He last played with the Lakers, with LeBron. But Melo at his prime was one of the one of the fiercest offensive players in the NBA. He had a really silky jumper. He had an array of like moves that would like I feel like he just found a way to bucket to score a bucket. And my favorite memory of him is him breaking the MSG record for most points. Um, it was one of those seasons where the Knicks just weren't in contention of anything, but he was just blazing that game, and it was one of my favorite memories of him. Um, to me, his Knicks legacy is a complicated one because as great as he was, the furthest we reached were the conference semifinals. And listen, he took on a burden that many other superstar players didn't want. He did, and he never shied away from the moment. I think one of the underrated aspects of him when he was here was that he never made excuses. He was always someone who was a stand-up guy. Uh, one of the few people that the media actually enjoyed talking to. Um, and I don't know, he represented the city well. I just wish that the Knicks made more of an effort to put a better team around him all those years that he was in the NBA and he was
Yeah.
with us being the Knicks. um, yeah, so it'll always be a what if for him, for me. Do I think that the Knicks should hang his jersey at MSG? I think they should. Um, I think that he's someone who you want to keep sort of happy in the sense that like, he'll always be part of this team, like, you know, as part of the culture changing of what the Knicks were in those like early 2000s years. Like he was sort of like I don't want to say pioneer, but sort of like this guy who made New York cool again. Um and yeah, he was a great player. I really enjoyed him.
Yeah, no, I mean, he was the best Nick we've ever seen, right? Like, this was the guy. And I'll never forget the coming home video. And yes, it's been played out very many times.
Mhm.
And whether he's from here, from New York or not, that's a problem for another day. But, this is one of the greatest scorers I've ever seen. He was here for 7 seasons or, 6.5 seasons. He was an all-star in every one of them. So he got here, he immediately brought star power back to New York. This was a group that was still kind of reeling from our plan has to be as bad as possible and collect as many bad contracts as possible to save room for LeBron James. And him and Amari were really the hope after that disaster. And so I'll always be appreciative of Carmelo because he just gave the Knicks a competitive threat on an every game basis. And yes, they did not have much playoff success. There's very few players in the NBA who can do that on their own. And as you said, they never, in Denver or here, they never really found a way to put a team around him. And I think part of that just comes down to they traded for him instead of waiting for him to sign as a free agent. Whose fault that is, we can go back and forth forever. But at the end of the day, I'm disappointed he never got that ring. But he's to me one of the all-time great players that didn't get the ring. If that helps,
Do you think the Knicks should hang up his jersey?
I do. I think he was here long enough to justify that. When we talk about who should get there, who shouldn't. Um, 7 seasons, all at a very high level, 10-time All-Star. And I think also you're competing with Denver a little bit to say, was he a Knick? Was he a Nugget? Who should he go into the Hall of Fame as? Retiring his number kind of solidifies what he means to the city. And I think that might help justify 8 seasons in Denver, 7 seasons in New York. Which one should he go into the Hall as? Maybe that pushes you over the envelope to say he's a New York Knick.
Yeah. Although, as you said, like he had more success in in Denver.
Did he though?
He did. He went to the Western Conference Finals against the Lakers.
Once. All right. Well, he went one round further against as a Nugget than as a Knick. Uh, Denver Nugget, 24.8 points per game as a New York Knick, 24.7 points a game, 0.1 points higher as a Denver Nugget.
Um, yeah, man, Melo was awesome. You're right though, man. I wish he really won a ring, you know?
Yeah, it would have been great. And, you see him kind of holding on for dear life with like the Lakers last year, Portland the year before, and you're always kind of rooting for those teams to just one, play him, and then two, get him either that ring or get him traded to a championship team. And I was really hoping he would get one last ride somewhere this year. Of course, now the team he was on last year is in the Western Conference Finals. But can you imagine if he was like the seventh man on this Denver team right now? Like, shame on them for not bringing him back. And that would have also made him a nugget in the Hall of Fame for sure if he won one there. But that's going to do it for us here on the All Hoops podcast. Those are the things I think about, right? That's going to do it for us here on the All Hoops podcast. Thank you for watching on YouTube, listening on Apple and Spotify. We'll be back next week to talk about the NBA Finals.
Bye, everyone.